Maya Rodriguez had always believed that talent would speak louder than appearance. At 26, she held 2 master's degrees in international business and spoke 5 languages fluently. Her resume was pristine, filled with internships at prestigious consulting firms and academic achievements that would make any employer proud. But as she sat in the sterile waiting room of Sterling & Associates, one of Manhattan's most exclusive marketing agencies, she couldn't shake the familiar knot in her stomach. The receptionist's eyes had lingered a moment too long when Maya entered, and the barely concealed surprise on her face said everything Maya needed to know. She was used to it by now. At 4 feet 2 inches tall, with achondroplasia, Maya had learned early in life that first impressions often overshadowed first qualifications. "Ms. Rodriguez." A tall woman in an impeccably tailored suit appeared at the reception desk. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, head of human resources. Please, follow me." Maya gathered her leather portfolio and followed Jennifer down a corridor lined with awards and photographs of the company's successful campaigns. The interview room was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Jennifer gestured to a chair across from a mahogany conference table, and Maya climbed onto it with practiced grace, her feet barely touching the floor. "So, Maya," Jennifer began, her voice professional but distant, "tell me about yourself." For the next 45 minutes, Maya poured her heart into that interview. She discussed her thesis on cross-cultural marketing strategies, her fluency in Mandarin that had helped a previous employer secure a major contract with a Beijing-based company, and her innovative ideas for reaching underrepresented demographics. She presented a mock campaign she had developed specifically for Sterling & Associates, complete with budget projections and timeline estimates. Jennifer nodded politely throughout, occasionally jotting notes on her tablet. When Maya finished her presentation, the room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. "Your qualifications are impressive," Jennifer said finally, her tone suggesting a but was coming. "However, I have concerns about whether you'd be the right fit for our team dynamic. Our client-facing roles require a certain presence." "You understand." Maya felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression neutral. "I understand you might have concerns, but I'd like to assure you that my stature has never hindered my professional performance. In fact, I found that clients often remember me more vividly, which has actually been an advantage in building lasting business relationships." Jennifer's smile was tight. "I appreciate that perspective, Maya, but we're looking for someone who can command a room immediately. Our clients expect a certain image when they're investing significant resources in our campaigns." She closed her tablet with a soft click. "We'll be in touch." Maya knew she wouldn't be hearing from them again. As she walked through the lobby, she caught a glimpse of the other candidates waiting for their interviews. All tall, conventionally attractive, and undoubtedly less qualified than she was. The elevator ride down felt eternal, each floor a reminder of how far she still had to fall. Outside on Fifth Avenue, the autumn air was crisp, and the city hummed with its usual energy. Maya stood for a moment, watching people rush past in their important suits carrying their important briefcases to their important jobs. She had been so certain this would be her moment, her breakthrough into the corporate world she had worked so hard to enter. Her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Carlos. "How did it go, superstar?" Maya stared at the message, not sure how to respond. How do you explain that despite being more qualified than half the people in that building, your height had disqualified you before you even opened your mouth? How do you tell someone who believes in you unconditionally that the world doesn't see your worth the way he does? She typed back, still waiting to hear back. "Grabbing coffee, talk tonight." As Maya walked toward the nearest Starbucks, she passed a newsstand where the latest issue of Forbes magazine featured a cover story about revolutionary business leaders. The headline read, "The New Face of Corporate America, Diversity Drives Innovation." She almost laughed at the irony. Inside the coffee shop, Maya ordered her usual, a large vanilla latte with an extra shot, and found a corner table. She pulled out her laptop and began updating her job search spreadsheet. Sterling & Associates joined a growing list of rejections, each one accompanied by carefully worded explanations that never quite said what they really meant. A young barista approached her table. "Excuse me," he said quietly, but I couldn't help overhearing your phone call earlier about your interview. I just wanted to say that I'm a business student at NYU, and I've read some of your published articles on LinkedIn. Your work on inclusive marketing strategies is brilliant. Any company that doesn't see that is missing out." Maya looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." "I'm serious," the barista continued. "I actually cited your article about cultural sensitivity in digital advertising in my senior thesis. You're going to find the right opportunity. I'm sure of it." After he returned to work, Maya sat alone with her coffee, feeling a mixture of gratitude and determination. She had worked too hard and overcome too much to let a few narrow-minded HR departments derail her dreams. Tomorrow, she would dust off her resume, reach out to new contacts, and continue her search. But tonight, she would allow herself to feel disappointed. She would call Carlos and probably cry a little, then wake up tomorrow ready to prove once again that success has nothing to do with fitting into someone else's narrow definition of what a successful person should look like. As she packed up her laptop, Maya caught her reflection in the coffee shop window. Staring back at her was a determined young woman with kind eyes and an unshakable belief in her own worth. That person, she decided, was going to change the world, whether the world was ready for her or not. 3 weeks after the Sterling and Associates rejection, Maya found herself in an even more frustrating position. Her savings were dwindling, and the job market seemed determined to remind her that qualifications only mattered if you came in the right package. She had received polite rejection emails citing cultural fit and team dynamics, but never once had anyone questioned her actual abilities. On a particularly gray Tuesday morning, Maya decided to treat herself to breakfast at the Plaza Hotel's Oak Room. It was an indulgence she couldn't really afford, but sometimes a girl needed to feel fancy, even if her bank account protested. She wore her favorite navy blazer and the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for graduation, armor for facing another day of disappointment. The hostess, a statuesque blonde with practiced courtesy, seated Maya at a small table near the window. "Will you be dining alone today?" she asked, her tone implying that this was somehow unfortunate. "Yes, just me," Maya replied, settling into the plush chair and opening her menu. The prices made her wince slightly, but she was committed to this small act of self-care. 20 minutes later, Maya was enjoying her Eggs Benedict and scrolling through job listings on her phone when she became aware of raised voices at the table next to her. A man in an expensive suit was berating a young waitress who couldn't have been more than 19. "This is completely unacceptable," the man was saying, his voice loud enough to draw stares from other diners. "I specifically asked for my eggs over medium, and these are clearly over hard. How difficult is it to get a simple breakfast order correct?" The waitress, whose name tag read Sophie, was fighting back tears. "I'm so sorry, sir. I can have the kitchen remake them right away." "You can have the kitchen remake them?" The man's voice dripped with condescension. "You should have had them made correctly the first time. This is supposed to be a 5-star establishment, not some roadside diner. I have a very important business meeting in 20 minutes, and now my entire schedule is ruined because of your incompetence." Maya watched as Sophie's hands trembled while she reached for the plate. The girl was clearly new, probably working her way through college, and this entitled bully was treating her like she was less than human over a breakfast order. "Sir," Sophie said quietly, "I really am sorry. I'll make sure." "Don't tell me what you'll make sure of," the man interrupted. "Get me your manager. Now. I want to speak to someone who actually knows how to run a restaurant." That was enough. Maya had spent weeks being treated as less than worthy by people who had never bothered to look beyond the surface, and she wasn't about to watch this young woman endure the same kind of cruelty. She stood up and walked over to their table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I couldn't help but notice that you're having an issue with your breakfast." The man looked down at her, his expression shifting from anger to condescension. "I'm sorry, but this doesn't concern you. I'm dealing with a service issue here." "Actually, it does concern me," Maya continued, maintaining eye contact despite having to crane her neck to meet his gaze. "You see, I'm a paying customer in this restaurant, just like you. And your behavior is disrupting my dining experience and that of every other person in this room. My behavior. The man's face was reddening. I'm the one being subjected to terrible service. You're being subjected to a minor inconvenience that any reasonable person would handle with grace and understanding, Maya interrupted. This young woman has apologized multiple times and offered to correct the situation immediately. Your response has been to berate her publicly and treat her with complete disrespect. Sophie was staring at Maya with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. Several other diners had turned to watch the confrontation unfold. The man seemed at a loss for words. Look, miss, whoever you are, this really isn't your business. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I'm making it my business, she said. You know what I see when I look at Sophie? I see someone who's working hard, trying to do her best, and deserving of basic human dignity. You know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who thinks his money gives him the right to treat service workers like they're beneath him. She turned to Sophie, whose eyes were wide with surprise. Sophie, you're doing a great job. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Now, why don't you get this gentleman his corrected order, and I'm sure he'll remember his manners when you return. The man opened his mouth to argue, but something in Maya's steady gaze seemed to deflate his anger. He looked around the room, suddenly aware that every eye was on him, and most of those eyes were disapproving. Fine, he muttered, sinking back into his chair. Just get the eggs fixed. Sophie hurried away toward the kitchen, and Maya returned to her table. She had barely taken a sip of her coffee when someone approached from behind. That was quite impressive. The voice was deep, warm, and tinged with amusement. Maya turned to see a man in his mid-50s standing beside her table. He was tall and distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike the breakfast bully, this man carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Oh, that, Maya said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. I just don't like seeing people picked on, especially when they're just trying to do their job. May I? The man gestured to the empty chair across from her. Maya nodded, curious about this stranger who had witnessed her impromptu defense of the waitress. I'm David Chen, he said, extending his hand. And I have to say, I was impressed by how you handled that situation. That took real courage. Maya Rodriguez, she replied, shaking his hand. And it wasn't courage so much as common decency. That man was being completely unreasonable. David smiled. You know, I've been in the restaurant business for over 20 years, and I can tell you that what you just did is rarer than you might think. Most people would have looked the other way, minded their own business. But you saw someone who needed an advocate, and you stepped up. Are you in the restaurant business? Maya asked, intrigued. Among other things, David said with a mysterious smile. But tell me about you, Maya Rodriguez. What brings you to the plaza on a Tuesday morning? Besides performing acts of heroism, of course. Maya laughed despite herself. Hardly heroism. And I'm here because sometimes you need to remind yourself that you deserve nice things, even when the world seems determined to convince you otherwise. There was something in her tone that made David lean forward slightly. That sounds like there's a story there. Isn't there always? Maya said, stirring her coffee absently. Let's just say I'm between opportunities at the moment, and the job market can be challenging. What kind of work do you do? Marketing and international business development. I specialize in cross-cultural strategies and inclusive branding. Maya found herself opening up to this stranger in a way that surprised her. I have 2 master's degrees, speak 5 languages, and have published articles in several business journals. But apparently, that's not enough if you don't look the part. David's expression grew serious. Ah, he said quietly. You've encountered the people who judge books by their covers. Something like that. Maya met his eyes. It's funny how the same people who preach about diversity and inclusion in their mission statements can't see past physical appearance when it comes to actual hiring decisions. Their loss, David said simply. And I mean that sincerely. Any company that would overlook talent because of something as superficial as appearance is going to struggle in today's global marketplace. Before Maya could respond, Sophie appeared at their table with a fresh pot of coffee and a grateful smile. I just wanted to thank you again, she said to Maya. What you did. No one's ever stood up for me like that before. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, Maya replied. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After Sophie left, David looked at Maya with renewed interest. You know, he said, I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Are you free for lunch? David Chen's office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, with panoramic views of the city that took Maya's breath away. She had followed him here after their breakfast conversation, curious about this mysterious man who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts on business and life. Please, make yourself comfortable, David said, gesturing toward a seating area that looked more like a luxury living room than a corporate office. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water. I'm fine, thank you, Maya replied, settling into a plush leather chair that, for once, seemed designed with people of various heights in mind. She noticed that David had several adjustable chairs and surfaces throughout his office, details that most people wouldn't think twice about, but that spoke to a level of thoughtfulness she rarely encountered. David sat across from her, and Maya couldn't help but notice the walls lined with awards, photographs with world leaders, and framed magazine covers. One particular photo caught her attention. David shaking hands with a group of diverse business leaders at what appeared to be a UN summit. You're wondering what exactly I do, David said, following her gaze. The thought had crossed my mind, Maya admitted. Your business card just says, David Chen, CEO. But CEO of what? David smiled. Chen Global Enterprises. We're a multinational investment and development company. We focus on identifying undervalued assets and helping them reach their full potential. Maya felt her eyebrows rise. Chen Global Enterprises was one of the largest private equity firms in the world, known for its innovative approach to business development and its commitment to social responsibility. She had studied several of their case studies in business school. You're that David Chen, she said, feeling slightly embarrassed. I should have recognized you. Should you have? I prefer to meet people without the baggage of preconceptions. It gives me a better sense of who they really are. David leaned forward slightly. Like what I saw at breakfast this morning. You didn't know who I was, but you still stood up for someone who needed help. That tells me more about your character than any resume ever could. Maya felt a flush of warmth at the compliment, but also a nagging suspicion. Mr. Chen, I have to ask, is this some kind of elaborate job interview? Because if it is, I should tell you up front that I've had my fill of rejection for 1 month. David laughed, a genuine sound that filled the spacious office. Fair question, and I appreciate your directness. But no, this isn't a job interview. At least, not in the traditional sense. He stood and walked to his desk, returning with a tablet that he handed to Maya. On the screen was a detailed business plan for something called the Catalyst Initiative. For the past year, David explained, I've been developing a new venture. Something different from our usual investment portfolio. I want to create a consultancy that specializes in helping companies build truly inclusive cultures, not just diversity for diversity's sake, but real, meaningful inclusion that drives innovation and success. Maya scrolled through the document, her excitement growing with each page. The plan was comprehensive, well-researched, and ambitious. It addressed everything from unconscious bias training to accessibility improvements to cross-cultural communication strategies. This is incredible, she said, looking up at David. The market research alone must have taken months. And these financial projections. You're talking about revolutionizing how companies think about diversity and inclusion. I am, David confirmed. But here's the thing, I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands these challenges not just intellectually, but personally. Someone who has experienced firsthand what it means to be underestimated and overlooked. Someone with the skills to build bridges between different communities and the courage to call out injustice when they see it. Maya felt her heart rate quicken. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, David said. Full equity stake, complete creative control over the consultancy's direction, and a budget that would make most Fortune 500 companies jealous. I want you to build this from the ground up, Maya. I want you to create the company you wish had existed when you were job hunting. Maya stared at him, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, did you say partnership? As in, actual ownership. 51% ownership, to be precise. This would be your company, your vision. I would provide the funding and the business connections, but the leadership would be entirely yours. The tablet slipped slightly in Maya's hands as the magnitude of what David was proposing sank in. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a chance to build something revolutionary, something that could change the lives of countless people who had faced the same discrimination she had experienced. But why me? She asked. You don't really know me. We met 2 hours ago in a restaurant. David was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Maya, I've been in business for over 3 decades. I've learned to recognize potential when I see it, regardless of the package it comes in. What I saw this morning wasn't just someone standing up to a bully, it was a natural leader, someone with the moral courage to do what's right even when it's uncomfortable. He pulled up another document on his tablet. After our breakfast, I had my team do some research. Your academic record is flawless. Your published work on inclusive marketing has been cited in dozens of academic papers. The consulting project you did for that tech startup in San Francisco increased their diverse customer base by 40% in 6 months. Maya's eyes widened. How did you find out about that? That project was under a non-disclosure agreement. I have my sources, David said with a slight smile. The CEO of that company is a friend of mine. When I called him an hour ago and mentioned your name, he spent 20 minutes telling me about how you transformed their entire approach to customer engagement. He also mentioned that he tried to hire you full-time, but you had already committed to finishing your graduate program. I had no idea he felt that way about the project, Maya said softly. I just did what made sense from a business perspective. And that's exactly why I want to work with you, David replied. You don't see inclusion as charity or political correctness. You see it as good business. That's the perspective this industry needs. Maya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere down there were dozens of qualified people being rejected from jobs because they didn't fit someone's narrow idea of what success looked like. Somewhere down there were companies struggling to connect with diverse markets because their leadership teams all looked the same and thought the same way. What would you need from me? She asked, still facing the window. Everything, David said simply. Your passion, your expertise, your unique perspective. I want you to hire the team, develop the methodology, choose the clients. This would be your company in every sense that matters. Maya turned back to face him. And what do you get out of it? The satisfaction of knowing I helped create something important, David replied. And yes, a return on my investment when your company starts generating the millions in revenue I know it's capable of. You seem very confident in my abilities. I am. The question is, are you confident in them? Maya looked around the office again, taking in the evidence of David's success, his global influence, his ability to make things happen on a scale she had only dreamed of. Then she thought about Sophie, the young waitress who had been reduced to tears by a man who saw her as less than human. She thought about all the brilliant people whose talents were being wasted because they didn't look the part. I have one condition, she said finally. Name it. Complete transparency. If this is going to work, if we're going to help companies build truly inclusive cultures, then we have to practice what we preach. That means honest conversations about power dynamics, about privilege, about the ways unconscious bias affects all of us, even the people with the best intentions. David nodded slowly. Agreed. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you hadn't brought that up. Maya walked back to her chair and sat down, looking David directly in the eyes. Then yes, Mr. Chen. I accept your offer. Let's change the world. David's smile was radiant. Welcome to Chen Global Enterprises, partner. And please, call me David. We have a lot of work to do. As they shook hands, Maya felt a surge of excitement unlike anything she had experienced before. This morning she had been an unemployed graduate student treating herself to an expensive breakfast. Now she was the co-owner of what could become one of the most influential consultancies in the corporate world. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same qualities that had made her unsuitable for traditional employment were exactly what made her perfect for this revolutionary opportunity. Sometimes, Maya thought, the universe had a sense of humor after all. 6 months after that life-changing breakfast at the plaza, Maya stood in the conference room of Catalyst Consulting's brand new offices in Lower Manhattan. The space was everything she had dreamed of, open, accessible, designed with people of all abilities in mind. Adjustable desks, multiple seating options, state-of-the-art assistive technology, and natural lighting that made everyone look their best during video conferences. She was reviewing presentation materials for their biggest pitch yet when her assistant, Marcus, knocked on the glass door. Maya, the Sterling and Associates team is here for their consultation, he said. Jennifer Walsh and 3 other executives. They're in conference room A. Maya felt a flutter of nervous excitement. Sterling and Associates, the same company that had rejected her 6 months ago for lacking the right presence, was now seeking Catalyst's help after a series of public relations disasters involving discrimination laws uses. Perfect timing, Maya said, gathering her materials. Let's show them what real presence looks like. The transformation in Maya's confidence over the past 6 months had been remarkable. Working with David, she had discovered leadership skills she never knew she possessed. She had hired a team of 12 brilliant consultants from diverse backgrounds, former executives who had hit glass ceilings, academics whose research had been overlooked, activists who understood systemic change from the ground up. Together, they had developed a methodology that was already being hailed as revolutionary in business journals. Their first client, a tech company struggling with retention among minority employees, had seen a 30% improvement in employee satisfaction scores within 3 months. Word had spread quickly through corporate networks, and now Catalyst had a waiting list of companies seeking their services. As Maya entered conference room A, she saw Jennifer Walsh's eyes widen with recognition, followed quickly by what looked like embarrassment. The other Sterling executives, all tall, all conventionally corporate, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Good afternoon, Maya said, taking her place at the head of the conference table with practiced authority. I'm Maya Rodriguez, CEO of Catalyst Consulting. I understand you're experiencing some challenges with workplace culture and inclusion. Jennifer cleared her throat. Yes, well, we've had some incidents recently that have brought certain issues to our attention. We're looking for guidance on how to improve our diversity and inclusion practices. I see, Maya said, opening her portfolio. Before we begin, I should mention that we've actually met before. I interviewed for a position at your company 6 months ago. The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer's face went pale, and Maya could practically see her trying to remember exactly what she had said during that interview. I'm not sure I recall. Jennifer stammered. You told me that your client-facing roles required a certain presence, and that clients expected a particular image when investing significant resources in your campaigns, Maya said calmly. You were concerned about whether I would be the right fit for your team dynamic. One of the other executives, a middle-aged man named Robert, leaned forward. Ms. Rodriguez, if there was any inappropriate behavior during your interview. Oh, there was nothing inappropriate, Maya interrupted smoothly. Everything was perfectly legal. You simply made a business decision based on your assessment of my qualifications. The question now is whether you're ready to make better business decisions going forward. She opened her laptop and projected her first slide onto the conference room screen. It showed Sterling and Associates' recent stock performance alongside headlines about their discrimination lawsuits. Let's talk about presence, Maya continued. In the past year, your company has faced 3 separate discrimination suits, lost 4 major clients to competitors who emphasize inclusion in their marketing, and seen your stock price drop by 15%. Meanwhile, companies with diverse leadership teams are outperforming the market by 25%. Jennifer was taking notes frantically, but her hands were visibly shaking. Your current client base is 92% white, 78% male, and has an average age of 54, Maya continued. The fastest-growing consumer demographics in your target markets are women under 35, people of color, and multicultural families. You're literally missing out on billions of dollars in potential revenue because your teams don't understand these markets. Robert spoke up. What exactly are you proposing? Maya clicked to her next slide, which outlined Catalyst's comprehensive culture transformation program. We don't just do diversity training, she said. We rebuild organizational DNA. We examine your hiring practices, your promotion criteria, your client acquisition strategies, and your internal communication patterns. We identify where unconscious bias is costing you money and talent, and we provide concrete solutions. She stood and walked around the table, making eye contact with each executive. Despite her height, her presence filled the room. For example, Maya continued, our preliminary research shows that Sterling and Associates has never promoted a person with a visible disability to senior management, despite having several highly qualified candidates in your pipeline. You've also passed on hiring candidates from HBCUs even when their qualifications exceeded those of candidates from Ivy League schools. How could you possibly know that? Jennifer asked. Because patterns of exclusion are predictable, Maya replied. When you've been on the receiving end of bias, you learn to recognize its fingerprints. What I'm offering you is the chance to break those patterns before they destroy your competitive advantage completely. The room fell silent as the executives absorbed the implications of what Maya was saying. Finally, Robert spoke. What would this partnership look like? Hypothetically speaking. Maya smiled. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Complete organizational assessment, followed by an 18-month transformation program. We'll work with your HR team to redesign your hiring processes, train your managers on inclusive leadership, and help you develop marketing strategies that actually connect with diverse audiences. She clicked to a slide showing potential revenue increases. Based on our work with similar companies, you could see client base expansion of 40% within 2 years, employee retention improvements of 60%, and stock price recovery of at least 25%. Jennifer looked up from her notes. And your fee for this service? $2 million, plus equity-based bonuses tied to your performance improvements, Maya said without hesitation. I know it sounds like a lot, but consider this, you're currently spending more than that annually on legal fees for discrimination suits. We're offering you a chance to invest that money in growth instead of damage control. The executives exchanged glances, clearly shocked by both the fee and the confidence with which Maya had presented it. I'll need to discuss this with our board, Robert said slowly. Of course, Maya replied. But I should mention that we currently have a 6-month waiting list for new clients. If Sterling and Associates wants to work with Catalyst, you'll need to make a decision within 2 weeks. As the meeting concluded and the Sterling executives filed out, Jennifer lingered behind. Maya, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. The way I handled your interview was unprofessional. And clearly, I was wrong about your qualifications. Maya looked at Jennifer for a long moment. 6 months ago, this woman's rejection had sent her into a spiral of self-doubt. Now, standing in her own conference room as the CEO of a rapidly growing company, Maya felt only compassion for someone who was finally beginning to see her own limitations. Jennifer, Maya said gently, you weren't wrong because you rejected me. You were wrong because you made assumptions about my capabilities based on my appearance. The apology I need isn't for me. It's for all the talented people you and companies like yours continue to overlook. You're right, Jennifer said. And I hope we'll have the chance to work together and do better. After Jennifer left, Maya stood alone in the conference room, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "How did it go with Sterling?" She typed back, "I think we just changed some minds. And possibly some lives." As Maya packed up her materials, she thought about Sophie, the young waitress whose defense had led to this moment. She thought about all the people still sitting in interviews, being told they weren't quite the right fit. And she smiled, knowing that Catalyst Consulting was just getting started. 1 year later, Maya stood on the stage of the Jacob Javits Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 3,000 business leaders gathered for the National Diversity and Inclusion Summit. She had been invited as the keynote speaker, a recognition that still felt surreal, even as Catalyst Consulting continued to break new ground in corporate transformation. 2 years ago, Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. I sat in a job interview where I was told that I lacked the presence necessary for client-facing work. The interviewer was concerned that I wouldn't be able to command a room or project the right image for their company. A murmur of recognition rippled through the audience. Many of them had heard similar stories, either as perpetrators or victims of such bias. Today, I want to talk about presence, Maya continued. Not the kind that comes from fitting into someone else's narrow definition of what leadership looks like, but the kind that comes from authenticity, competence, and the courage to see potential where others see obstacles. In the front row, David Chen sat beaming with pride. Beside him were several Catalyst team members, including Marcus and Dr. Sarah Kim, the former IBM executive who had become Maya's closest collaborator. In the third row, Maya spotted a familiar face, Sophie, the young waitress from the plaza, now dressed in professional attire and wearing a conference badge identifying her as a Cornell MBA student. 18 months ago, my business partner David Chen and I founded Catalyst Consulting with a simple premise. Maya went on. We believed that companies weren't just failing diverse candidates, they were failing themselves by overlooking talent that could drive innovation and growth. She clicked to her first slide, showing Catalyst's impact statistics. Today, I'm proud to report that the 37 companies we've worked with have seen an average revenue increase of 42%, employee satisfaction improvements of 68%, and customer base expansion of 51%. But more importantly, they've created environments where people of all backgrounds can thrive. The audience applauded, but Maya raised her hand for quiet. She had more to say. I want to share a story about one of our clients, a marketing agency that shall remain nameless. When they first came to us, they were facing multiple discrimination lawsuits and hemorrhaging both talent and clients. Their leadership team was convinced that diversity was a nice-to-have rather than a business imperative. Maya clicked to the next slide, showing before and after photos of diverse teams at work. Today, that same company has the most diverse leadership team in their industry. They've landed contracts with clients they never could have reached before, and their employee retention rate has improved by 70%. Their stock price has recovered completely, and they're now considered an industry leader in inclusive marketing. What Maya didn't mention was that Sterling and Associates had become one of Catalyst's most successful transformations. Jennifer Walsh had become a genuine advocate for inclusive hiring, and the company had even established a scholarship program for students with disabilities pursuing careers in marketing. But this isn't just about business metrics, Maya continued. It's about human potential. Every time we help a company remove barriers and expand their definition of talent, we change lives. She shared several success stories. The deaf software engineer who became a team lead after his company learned to communicate more inclusively, the veteran with PTSD who found her calling in project management once her employer understood her unique strengths, the immigrant entrepreneur who revolutionized his company's international expansion strategy. Each of these individuals had been overlooked or underestimated by previous employers, Maya explained. Not because they lacked talent, but because those employers lacked imagination. In the audience, Maya noticed several people wiping away tears. Her stories were resonating because they reflected experiences many had lived through themselves. Now, I want to address the elephant in the room, Maya said, her tone becoming more personal. Many of you are looking at me and thinking about my height. You're wondering how someone like me ended up on this stage, speaking to an audience of Fortune 500 executives and industry leaders. The answer is simple. I'm here because talent doesn't come in a standard package. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'm here because a visionary leader named David Chen saw past appearances and recognized potential. I'm here because I refused to let other people's limitations become my own. And I'm here because I learned that true presence isn't about commanding a room through physical stature. It's about commanding respect through competence, integrity, and the ability to create positive change. Maya clicked to her final slide, which showed a photograph of the Catalyst team taken at their recent company retreat. The image was a beautiful mosaic of diversity, people of different races, ages, abilities, and backgrounds, all united by their shared commitment to transformation. This is my team, Maya said with obvious pride. Former executives who hit glass ceilings, brilliant minds who were overlooked by traditional employers, activists who understand that real change happens from within institutions, not just outside them. Together, we've proven that diversity isn't just morally right, it's strategically essential. The applause was thunderous, with many audience members rising to their feet. Maya felt a surge of emotion as she looked out at the sea of faces, knowing that her words were reaching people who needed to hear them. Before I close, Maya continued, I want to make a challenge to every leader in this room. Go back to your companies and ask yourself, what talent am I missing because I'm looking in the wrong places? What innovations am I preventing because my teams all think alike? What markets am I ignoring because I don't understand them? She stepped closer to the edge of the stage, her voice growing more intense. And then I want you to do something radical. I want you to hire someone who makes you uncomfortable. Not because they're unqualified, but because they're qualified in ways you didn't expect. I want you to promote someone who doesn't look like the leaders you're used to seeing. I want you to listen to voices that have been marginalized, perspectives that have been dismissed. Maya smiled, thinking of her journey from that devastating rejection to this moment of triumph. Because here's what I've learned, the people who don't fit your expectations are often the ones who will exceed them. The candidates who don't look the part might be exactly the ones who can rewrite the script. As she concluded her speech and walked off stage to another standing ovation, Maya was surrounded by audience members eager to share their own stories and connect with Catalyst's mission. Business cards were exchanged, partnerships were proposed, and several major corporations requested immediate consultations. But the moment that meant the most came when Sophie approached her near the convention center's coffee stand. Ms. Rodriguez, Sophie said, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know if you remember me, but... Sophie! Maya interrupted with genuine delight. Of course I remember you. Look at you, MBA student at Cornell. I'm so proud of you. I wanted to thank you, Sophie said, her eyes bright with tears. What you did that day at the plaza, it changed everything for me. Not just because you stood up to that awful man, but because you showed me what real leadership looks like. You inspired me to go back to school, to believe that I could be more than just someone who serves other people's success. Maya felt her own eyes welling up. Sophie, you always had that potential. I just saw what was already there. I'm starting an internship at a nonprofit next month, Sophie continued. We work with young women from underprivileged backgrounds, helping them develop leadership skills and professional confidence. I tell them your story all the time, how you turned rejection into revolution. As they hugged goodbye, Maya reflected on the beautiful circularity of that moment. A chance encounter at a restaurant had led to a business partnership that had transformed into a movement. And now that movement was inspiring the next generation of leaders who would continue the work of creating more inclusive, more innovative, more human workplaces. Later that evening, Maya and David sat in a quiet bar overlooking the Hudson River, decompressing from the day's events. You know, David said, raising his glass, when I first approached you about this partnership, I thought I was taking a chance on you. Now I realize you were taking a chance on me. Maya laughed. We were taking a chance on each other. And on the possibility that business could be a force for positive change. Speaking of which, David said, pulling out his phone, we just received 3 new client inquiries during your speech. Including one from a company I never thought would admit they needed help with inclusion. Which one? David showed her the email. It was from the CEO of one of the largest consulting firms in the world, a company known for its traditional, old-school culture and resistance to change. "Looks like your revolution is spreading," David observed. Maya smiled, thinking about all the talented people who were still waiting for their breakthrough moments, still facing rejection from employers who couldn't see past their own preconceptions. She thought about the companies that were missing out on incredible talent because they prioritized image over ability. And she felt a renewed sense of purpose. "This is just the beginning," she said. "We've proven that inclusion drives innovation, that diversity creates competitive advantage, that the people who don't fit traditional molds are often the ones who can reshape entire industries." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the water. "Somewhere out there, there's a brilliant person sitting in an interview right now, being told they're not quite the right fit. Somewhere out there, there's a company about to make the biggest mistake of their corporate lives by passing on someone who could transform their entire business." Maya turned back to David, her eyes bright with determination. "Our job is to make sure that happens less and less, until one day it doesn't happen at all." As they finished their drinks and prepared to head home, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Rodriguez, I saw your speech today and it gave me the courage to start my own business. Thank you for showing me that being different isn't a disadvantage. It's a superpower. A grateful entrepreneur." Maya showed the message to David, who smiled. "See," he said. "Revolution." Walking out into the New York night, Maya felt the same sense of possibility that had carried her through that first breakfast meeting with David. The world was still full of barriers and biases, still resistant to change in many ways. But it was also full of potential. Potential in every overlooked candidate, every dismissed idea, every person who had been told they weren't quite right for the role. And Maya Rodriguez, the woman who had been rejected for lacking presence, was going to spend the rest of her career making sure that potential didn't go to waste. Because true presence, she had learned, wasn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It was about having the courage to exceed them. The fortune that CEO had offered her wasn't just financial. It was the opportunity to create a more equitable, more innovative, more human world of work. And that, Maya thought as she hailed a taxi home, was worth more than any salary could ever be. As her taxi pulled away from the curb, Maya caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Looking back at her was a successful CEO, a respected thought leader, a woman who had transformed her own rejection into a movement that was changing lives across corporate America. But more than that, she saw someone who had never compromised her values, never diminished her authentic self, never apologized for taking up space in rooms where people like her weren't expected to succeed. That person, Maya realized, had been there all along. She had just needed the right opportunity to let her true presence shine.